Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the All Sports Focus podcast. We are back here with our first episode of ASF Hoops of this season. We're back here doing our college basketball episodes. I am joined here by my brother Ryan and my dad Cliff over there. We appreciate Cliff joining us for today. These guys are both from the Stars Forever podcast as well. So go check out that podcast. So today we're just going to be talking about a little preseason.
Wait. Remember who this guy is. Who won
Yeah, he did.
the basketball
He
pool
did win.
last year? That's the shirt that I got for winning.
Yep.
So there you go. I
Yep,
had
he
to
did.
establish my credibility.
That was a part of the deal. That's why he's here today. No, I'm just kidding. You'll see a lot more of him on the college basketball episodes, but we appreciate him for joining. And go check out the Stars Forever podcast with Ryan and my dad. But before we hop into it here, we're gonna cue the intro. So today we're just going to be talking about a little preseason action here as the college basketball season officially kicks off a week from today. We are recording this on Monday the 27th. So obviously there's been some exhibition games and such played. Obviously the big one, as all three of us are Kentucky fans, the big one was this past Friday between Kentucky and Purdue. You don't really see an exhibition game between two top 10 teams really ever before since they just passed the rule this year allowing for that to happen, which I think a lot of teams are taking advantage of. Like you saw a lot of big schools, like you saw Arkansas and Cincinnati play. That was a Power Four matchup. You saw Kansas and Louisville. You saw Michigan and St. John's. You see a lot of these big schools now playing each other to kind of use this as tune-up games and to see where their team really is, better off than playing like freaking Kentucky would play like Minnesota State, like some D2 school, and beat them by 45 points. Like, that really didn't show you anything.
Well, Purdue's coach made
that?
a good point. Purdue's coach made a good point about this whole thing, which he goes, I need my players to get their ass kicked in the very first game to wake them up and make them understand what they really need to be able to do. And, you know, he got what he asked for.
Yeah. Ryan, do you agree with this, that a lot of these teams should be doing this, and we are seeing that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt your record. Like Purdue isn't 0-1 now. Kentucky isn't 1-0. It's just getting film down. It's seeing how you can perform, because for the past 6-7 months now, these guys have only been competing against themselves. And so I think it's an awesome environment for the fans. Rupp Arena was rocking for a huge game, and I'm sure if Kentucky goes to West Lafayette next year that it'll be a similar atmosphere. But it is nothing but good, because you get these great college basketball games to kind of start the season off, and there's really no downside to it.
Yeah, I think it's a very big tell and reason, because yes, it's an exhibition game. We're not trying to overreact. That was what the entire Kentucky fan base was saying Friday night. Was obviously was an awesome game to watch, all this, but we can't overreact too much, because like Ryan said, no team's 1-0, no team's 0-1. You basically just use it as another kind of glorified practice. But I think a big reason why this plays into it, because non-conference games at the beginning of the year, obviously a lot of teams play the majority of their non-conference games in those first 2 months of the season. And when March Madness time comes around, that's where you look back at for a lot of bubble teams. What did they do in the non-conference? What did they do in the months of November and December? And a lot of times, those are your first games of the year. Like I think it was like 6 straight years, Kentucky lost in the Champions Classic to either be Duke, Kansas, or be Michigan State. And you look back at the team last year, that win over Duke, who ended up going to the Final Four, ended up getting them probably that 3-seed bid, moved them up from kind of that bubble 4-seed into the 3-seed. A lot of those non-conference wins. And playing these high anticipated exhibition games allows them that chance to play high competitive opponents without having to worry about if you lose, then you kind of screw the pooch. But if you win, it's a good test for you.
Yeah,
So
but you get a lot more out of it than that. You get a good gauge of where you're at. The Purdue coach, like I mentioned earlier, about saying, are they physical enough? Can they keep up with the speed? I mean, Kentucky showed, that they probably had more speed than they thought they did. I don't think they expected to play with such speed and have other guards that can accelerate the ball up the court,
and we're
which
missing our fastest player.
yeah, and those are good learning lessons to tweak before you go into, before we'd open up with Duke or Michigan State, and you'd have nothing but judgment of playing against your own team. And you're always good against your own team, but you don't really know. So I like the exhibition thing. It was obviously Kentucky got more positive out of it than Purdue did. Purdue got a wake up call, and that's what he wanted his players to get. Call that a success for him too. So
Yeah. The one last thing we will say on Kentucky before we hop into the other exhibition games is Kentucky was missing their number one point guard, their starting point guard most likely for the entire season, and they are missing their projected top 10 pick starting center, Jaden Quinnitz, who probably won't be back for another month, I would say. That's a pretty dang good sign if you're beating the Purdue was the team all offseason. Everybody's like, this is the national championship front runner. These guys are going to run away with the Big Ten, all this. They have the National Player of the Year favorite in Braden Smith. In Kentucky, I think it was a lot closer than a 13-point game, honestly. The way that game played
Felt
was
like
like the
20
final
for most
score.
of the game.
Yeah. Like the final score, they got some garbage time points there at the end. But moving on here to some other big exhibition games. Another big one that happened on Friday night was Kansas and Louisville, a battle of the Big 12 and ACC opponents. The big storyline came out of that was Kansas's five-star freshman, number 2 player in the country, Darren Peterson, who now everybody's saying if he continues this up, he will be the no doubt number 1 pick. Because, I mean, he had 24 freaking points at halftime. And that's pretty dang impressive for a freshman playing in his first technical college game. But Kansas kind of, again, same story with Kentucky and Purdue. The score ended up a lot closer than the game actually felt and looked like. Ended up only like a 10-point game, but the whole time it felt like it was a 30-point game. I mean,
well,
Kansas, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to sorry to interrupt you because we got kind of a lag here. It's the same thing as the Kentucky game. Coaches are trying different lineups, right? And trying different players and different sets and different people. And that's why the scores are really kind of askew. They're really not really representative of the games, in my opinion, because you had guys playing together that likely never will play together in the season, right? And guys got in at the end, or whoever was ahead is obviously pulling their normal starters and playing the back end of the bench just to give them an opportunity to show what they got. So I don't look at the scores as any indicator. I think you really had to watch the game, to see who really got something out of the game.
Ryan, what do you think about this game?
I think Louisville's gotten a lot of praise, and I'm not really sure what all they backed up. The fact that they're being talked about as a top 10 team, as this Final Four contender, as a national title contender, all basically because they have a guard that's decent and like should be drafted in the first round this year, and then a shooter from a tiny school out in the Big East. Um, to me, I think this is a Kansas team that's kind of on a down year. I mean, Kansas was ranked like 21st or 22nd and really wasn't expected to contend much for a national title this year, kind of with the understanding that this is a rebuild year in Lawrence. And the fact that they came in and kind of boat raced Louisville from the start in Louisville at their home arena it's not a great sign to me, because besides Darren Peterson, there's really nothing else on Kansas's team that jumps out to me as like, man, they've just got a dominant front court or a dominant back court or anything that really jumps out too much at me. And so the fact that they were up by 20 points for most of this game and really only gave up garbage time points to make it an 11-point win, and Louisville giving up 90 plus points to Kansas, I think exposed a lot of flaws in Louisville's team that I think can be taken advantage of early on in the season for sure.
One man don't make a team, right? If you've heard me preach that over and over again, and you get these superstar point guards, they can have a cold night and you're toast, right?
Mhm.
Or they get hurt, or they get too many fouls in the first set. one man don't make a team, and that's going to be Louisville's problem as over reliance on 1 to 2 guys. That depth is key now, just because of foul troubles, everything else I'm talking about. Everybody lives and dies by the three, and so if you don't have depth for the front guys that are cold as hell, then you're gonna get hurt in the end.
That's why my immediate thought to this year, because obviously the top three teams talked about all offseason were Purdue, Houston, and Florida, with teams like UConn and St. John's and Duke and Michigan and Kentucky all behind them. But my first thought process went to Houston, Florida, and Kentucky, because you look at those three teams, and it's not reliant on one guy to score 20 points a night. They have backups. I mean, you think of Kentucky's team, they've got 12 guys that they can play consistently. You could say even 13. You look at Florida's team, they're probably 8, 9 deep as well. You look at Houston's team, they're probably 10, 11 deep. That's a thing where you see that was kind of the downfall of Duke's team last year, especially when they collapsed in the second half against Houston in the Final Four. Cooper Flagg and Colin Knippel weren't producing. Where the hell did they go after that? Where did they go? Nowhere. The offense fell apart in the last 10 minutes of the game, and that blew the game for them. But it showed, like in the Kentucky one exhibition game. Haven't seen Houston or Florida play in their exhibition games yet, but one guy maybe wasn't performing. Jasper Johnson comes off the bench and drops 15 points. I mean, that's the thing you need in college basketball, where you've seen that kind of change over the last 2 years with the transfer portal, with the roster limits expanding, with the NIL. I mean, all that stuff. We're not going to get into that because that's a whole nother freaking topic.
Yeah, that's all.
But with that whole development, that changes how teams are building their team. I mean, we talked about this towards the end of the season. Me and Ryan did, just how the way Kentucky was constructing their team. Obviously, we're always going to talk Kentucky's going to be our main source because that's who we're fans of. But that's how they constructed their team. They're 12 men deep. They could literally throw out any lineup. I think I saw a stat today. Kentucky played like 19 different lineup combinations in that game against Purdue. And you really didn't see that much of a dip in any of the lineups because there is so many different combinations you can come out with. And then you add in the fact that when they get Jalen Lowe, when they get Jane Quinnitz back, that's just 2 more guys that you coming in this season, you're saying those are 2 of our top 3 players right there. And then you just see it go from there. So when you're approaching that question, though, you see the teams like we brought up with Louisville, where they're very reliant on Ryan Conwell and Isaac McNeely, and they have 0 front court presence. Their supposed German superstar, Sanda Fru, had 0 points and about 2 rebounds and I think 4 fouls in the first half, or 3 fouls. Like, when it comes down to something like that, you got to have production from the whole team to beat. Even Ryan said Kansas was on a down year. You're gonna have to have whole team production to win these games against other high opponents. And then you look at when it's in March Madness in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, round of 32, whatever. You're gonna have to have the whole team production because if your star guy doesn't show up, you're screwed.
Well,
So
I'll take it one more step further. It's not only depth, it's age, right? And I think a lot of teams the day of having these superstars freshman class full, teams is done. With the transfer portal, with all this stuff, having experienced guys on the court and on the bench, is also, I think, what hurt, Louisville in this case, because, they need somebody to steady the youngsters and they need somebody to steady the game. And also, usually those older guys are the ones that are more steadfast in their defense and willing to play defense. And I know we're talking high level stuff and not exactly about Louisville, but I'm talking that way. But I think it's the blueprint now has changed.
absolutely. So yeah, looking ahead here over the next week or two, looking at some of the big games here of this first week of the season. I mean, starting off on Monday night, you've got Florida and Arizona. That should be a very big game, kickoff game in Las Vegas. 2 top 12, top 13 teams right there. Also, not really, I wouldn't say this is a huge game, but you got Villanova, BYU. Villanova, new coaching staff, basically whole new team, looking to kind of finally get back on track since Jay Wright playing that kind of revamped BYU team. And then on Tuesday night, you've got Texas and Duke. I don't know if I would really call that a big game either, but, it's kind of the same format there. But Then obviously the following
I don't
week
know
is the
where
Champions Classic.
I don't know where
What?
Texas is gonna be. I mean, Texas is always getting says the big men, and so I don't know where they're going to be this year because I mean, so many of those guys turned over, you know? It'd be interesting to see how they come out. Duke is gonna be the normal Duke, 1 or 2 superstars and try to run the court and try to play up tempo, and Texas is the opposite. They're gonna kind of stop you
Yeah,
from running.
especially with Sean Miller at the helm. He's gonna be
Yeah.
he's a very physical basketball coach. So, but then the following week you're gonna have the Champions Classic. Um, sorry, that's way past. The following week you're gonna have Kentucky Louisville on Tuesday night, which is very unheard of. This game almost is never played in the month of November. It's usually that first, second week of December. But since Kentucky is playing Indiana this year in that time frame, the Kentucky Louisville game got moved up. Obviously, we would have rather it been later in the year. All the Kentucky fans joked about the fact that we think Louisville was scared of Jaden Quinitz. That's why they moved this game up because they knew he would most likely be unavailable for that game. But we're not gonna say anything because obviously it's on both sides to schedule it. But a little bit earlier. But as it shows right now, these two teams are kind of on opposite ends after, yes, it's a first exhibition game. We're not trying to overreact. These two teams kind of seem like they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum here. One feeling very high after that first exhibition game, one team feeling very low after that first exhibition game. But it's still Kentucky Louisville. I mean, the game last year was very close, came down to the last couple minutes of the game. This game's always going to be close, besides the years of the Kenny Payne era where Louisville just sucked. But other than that, this game's usually always close. So, real quickly, just before we hop into the last segment here, what is one of your guys' thoughts on either side of the ball for this Kentucky Louisville game? Obviously, being Kentucky fans. Ryan?
I think this is guard play. At the end of the day, Louisville's front court doesn't scare me at all. And so I think there's a real opportunity there for Kentucky's front court with honestly the way Malachi Moreno played against Purdue, as well as just Mo Diabate and Brandon Garrison is rebounding, and Andrea Yelovich with his ball handling and shooting outside. But I do truly think this comes down to guard play. With Louisville having a couple very strong guards that can kind of score, it comes down to whether guys like Otega Owe and Jasper and Jalen Lowe hopefully being back, if those guys, Denzel Aberdeen, can make stops and force turnovers by Louisville's guard play, because I think if they can, this one becomes a runaway. Really, Louisville's shot is going to be 3-point shooting, keeping them in it, and scoring at a high clip to try and keep pace. Because otherwise, if they let Kentucky get rolling, I think this one could get ugly fast.
I differ. I think Kentucky's gonna slow them down, and they're gonna slow them down by going into a half-court game on the Kentucky offensive side. You got too much talent in the bigs. You've got too much, those guys in that high post offense that he runs. I think he's going to slow the guards down. I think they'll get up and run if they get a long rebound, or some ability. And especially since Kentucky keeps their center high post, high out, they run the court really well. But that's the only time I don't see them getting in a running gun game with them because even though I think they would win it just because they have more depth and more capability to keep running, but I think they're going to try to slow Louisville up and go from there. This is just my guess. Obviously, I'm not on the I'm not on the coaching plan committee.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Because it's really the battle of these two teams. We're talking about both having top 5 backcourts in the country coming into this year. Louisville has a lot more question marks in their backcourt, and Kentucky does not. Kentucky's a lot more solidified. And if we get production from I would say our bottom guys of the bench, like Jasper Johnson and Colin Chandler, I don't see how Kentucky loses this game. If Jalen Lowe is playing, if Otega Owe is playing, I don't see how the
Well,
guys off the bench. But yeah,
yeah, one
it'll
more
be
thing.
interesting.
One other point I would make is Kentucky's got the depth that they could burn some fouls on that point guard of Louisville. So they're going to match up with the best defenders and not worry about fouls because you can switch in, they got depth to go to 2 or 3 other guys to get fouls on him. So they're going to smother him. I mean, they're just going to face up, and face flame the whole time and only worry about defense unless you get the breakaways or breakouts after a long three, or a missed three kind of deal. But that's just another way to take out a point guard is just, face guarding,
Mm-hmm.
especially when
Yeah.
you got depth. Depth and speed are huge in college basketball these days.
Absolutely. All right. So the last segment of the day here is going to be we played this game a couple weeks ago with the college football top 25, but we're going to focus on basically the top 15 here for the college basketball preseason. We're going to play the contender or pretender game. We're going to go team by team. Preseason strictly thoughts if this team can win a national championship or we think this team is a pretender and they can't and they shouldn't even be ranked in the top 15 because we obviously all know everybody has their opinions about the AP poll and both sports because they have some interesting takes to say the least on both sides of the ball here. So we're going to go from the top to the bottom, starting at number 1 with the Purdue Boilermakers. We're just basically going to say, not really give much reasoning, basically just go contender or pretender and move on. So we keep this nice and short. I'm going to say Purdue is still a contender. They've got the big three, Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Wren. So I think they're still a contender. Ryan?
I think they're still a contender for sure.
I think contender, grade 8, Final Four. I don't see them winning at all.
Yeah. All right, number 2 team here, Houston. Kind of hard to pick against the Kelvin Sampson team just with the defense and the coaching ability of those teams. But yeah, I'm going to say contender.
Your mother hates Calvin Sampson for what he did to IU and all the cheating he did and everything else. She has no love for that man whatsoever, being an IU grad.
Ryan?
So I'm not to say pretender just for your mother and to stay out of the doghouse.
I think at this point they're a contender. Playing in an easy conference, they don't have a real rough road to get to the tournament.
All right, number 3, Florida. Again, I believe they're a contender. Reigning national champs, return all 3 of your front court starters. So yeah, contender.
Contender for me too. I think they've got the depth for sure.
Contender. They're in the final 2.
Yeah.
Unless something really happens or injuries or something like that. But, they're definitely a contender.
Top of the SEC battle between Florida and Kentucky, as the preseason poll kind of related to, is those 2 teams are going to be battling out for the SEC regular season championship. I would not be surprised if they see each other again in the conference championship if things play out as people are predicting. Number 4 team here is UConn. I'm going to say pretender. I just don't really think they have enough star power to really keep up with a lot of these other teams. They've got some good pieces, but also you look at the teams when they did win the national championships, very strong team, but not a lot of strong teams that they played in the path to the national championship. So I'm going to say pretender. Ryan?
Yeah, I think pretender, honestly. Kind of seen injuries start to play a toll on UConn already early on in this season, and I think that knocks them out fairly early.
I'm going to say contender. You got Hurley as the coach. He's pretty daggone smart, damn good coach. Comes up with some unique things. I'm going to keep him in the contender category just from coaching.
I think they're right on the borderline. Their just whole big thing will be staying healthy. So number 5 here is St. John's and Rick Pitino. I'm going to have to say pretender. I just think, like we mentioned in our conversation earlier, about teams that are too reliant on one guy. St. John's is going to be basically reliant on their starting 5 because they have no bench pieces at all. So if you shut down their starting 5 or if you run them to death and get them exhausted, they don't really have much coming off the bench. They're very top heavy here. So I'm going to say pretender as of right now, unless their starting 5 goes absolutely nuclear on this season. Ryan?
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think pretender just based on having no depth in a college basketball landscape that you have to have at least 8 guys that can realistically score for you. I think it's what cost them against Arkansas this last year in the round of 32.
Yeah, for that logic, I got to go pretender too. I agree with all your logic. There's depth is key. I think they're a really good team. I think they're going to take some people out because if they get hot and, their 3-point percentage last year was really high and that's hard to beat. But for the fact of how hard it is to get deep into the tournament without depth, I'm going to have to go pretender.
All right, number 6, Duke. I hate Duke every ounce in my body, but I'm still going to put them in the pretender category for now, just because it's the usual Duke storyline of having these star freshmen. And until I really, obviously, I can't remember which Boozer twin it is, but he's going to go top 3 in the draft, most likely top 5. But until I see the rest of the team really perform around him, staying with our logic of the whole episode here, it's tough for one guy to carry an entire team. And like I mentioned with them last year in the Final Four, I'm going to have to say they're pretender right now, but they are very close to that contender stage if their freshmen produce.
Yeah, I would agree. I think right on the border, slightly leaning pretender, just being very reliant on young players. Unlike what Cliff was talking about earlier, that gone are kind of the days of the trusting an all freshman phenom lineup. It hasn't worked. I mean, I don't even remember when the last time they won a national championship is. So it hasn't worked in a while. And I don't necessarily see it changing this year.
I still hate Christian Leitner, just for the record. We got ripped off, and I still will never forgive it for that. ESPN props them up. ESPN does what they normally do. They pick their favorites. They prop them up, just like they do with certain quarterbacks and certain teams in the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. They are pretenders. They might win a few games, but, who gives a damn? I hate UConn. I mean, Duke, my Lord.
All right, number 7, the University of Michigan. I'm going to have to say they're a contender. I watched them play St. John's. That was a very competitive game. They've got the number 1 player out of the portal in Axel Lindenborg. Other good pieces in the front court. You got a decent enough back court. I just think the physicality of their lineup is really going to give a lot of teams trouble. So I'm going to say contender.
I think contender here. The Big Ten is not looking super strong as far as the conference overall. Kind of pretty high, top heavy, and I think they'll get through the Big Ten fairly unscathed and hit tournament time at a pretty healthy lineup, which makes them definitely a threat in March.
Well, and Kentucky gave them the model of how to beat Purdue, right, in the Big Ten, because I think everybody watched that game and now understands how Purdue's got the one little guard and that's it. Take care of him and then just run him to death and beat him with speed. So Michigan just becomes a contender, as you said, Ryan, just because of the lack of depth in the Big Ten.
Number 8, BYU. I believe they're a contender as well. Number 1 freshman in the country coming in. Got Rob Wright from Baylor. Returned some pieces from in a Sweet 16. No, they were Elite 8 last year, weren't they? Elite 8 team from last year. Yeah, didn't they beat Alabama? No, Alabama beat them.
did.
No. No, Alabama won. Alabama won. So Sweet 16 team from last year for BYU. A lot of good returning pieces. I think I'm going to say they're a contender just because it's really going to come down to basically them, Houston, and Texas Tech really much in the Big 12. And for that reason, I'm going to push them into the contender group there.
Yeah, I'm right on the border. I'm leaning slightly contender. I think just based on great shooting and then having AJ, however you say his last name, Devinyansa. I do think they have the pieces there. It'll be interesting to see whether they can match up athletically. I think some of their best shooters are liabilities big time on the defensive side of the ball. So that opens them up to some vulnerabilities. But overall, I think they can contend for a national championship.
I'm going to have to no vote because I don't know anything about them.
Fair enough. Better than saying something and looking stupid, right?
Exactly.
All right, number 9, the University of Kentucky. Obviously, we're all going to say contender, but this is for real. I think this is the most contender-worthy team Kentucky has had, and I would say the last 5-6 years. We got the SEC preseason player of the year. You got a lot of great pieces, and you're just going to continue to get more healthy and a better overall team throughout the whole season. And what was the number 1 problem for Kentucky's team last year was defense and athleticism. Sorry, there are 2 problems. Were defense and athleticism. And what did they mostly go get out of the portal? Both of those 2 things were their big focus. But I will say their one weakness will just be if they are able and consistently able to shoot the 3 ball, just because they don't really have a guy like Kobe Brea or Jackson Robinson from last year. They've just got a couple pieces here and there. So they're just going to need a lot of consistent shooting. But obviously, they're a contender. Go Cats. That's all needs to be said. So, Ryan?
Yeah, contender for sure. I think even not as a Kentucky fan, there's a reason the coaches poll has them as number 2 in the country after this exhibition weekend. So people recognize it, and I just think you have so many lineup combinations with matchups of scoring and rebounding and attacking the rim versus outside shooting that you present such a matchup challenge. And then just the depth as far as having 12 guys that you can consistently go to. You really can't ever run them down. You can press if you're Kentucky. You can run a lot of cardio intensive defenses and just bring in new guys and rotate fresh bodies in. So I think they present a lot of matchup challenges.
Well, you guys didn't leave me anything left to say, so I'm just going to say contender. And even though I won the pool last year, I still had Kentucky's winning. I do it the same way every year. It's always going to be that no matter what. I'm sorry, people hate me, but I'm named after 2 Kentucky basketball players. So if you don't think I bleed blue, then you're blind. So yes, contender.
And we are beyond excited because football season just sucks. So the second that
What you do
big
until basketball season starts.
Yep, the second Big Blue Madness hit about 2 weeks ago. It officially flicked to basketball season for all Kentucky fans. And then based on these past 2 weeks of the Kentucky football season, kind of wraps up the last 3 years of Kentucky football, really in 2 games. So don't really care anymore. Just keep on losing so we can get a new coach is really the only thing I care about. But we're only going to do the top 10 here, so we're going to focus on our last team here and Texas Tech Elite 8 team from last year. Had a great comeback over Arkansas in the Sweet 16. Returning not Jacob Toppin, Lord, that's a throwback. Why am I blanking on his name? Man, what is that guy's name? That's going to bother me. Hold up. He was literally like player of the year last year in the Big 12. I'm looking it up. Gosh, this is JT Toppin. I was close. JT Toppin. Basically Big 12 player of the year again. Preseason player of the year. He's going to be in the All-American National Player of the Year conversations. And they've got some good pieces around them as well. They're a well-coached team. So Texas Tech is a contender for me.
I think they're a contender for sure. A Big 12, being able to kind of work through that. They've got a National Player of the Year candidate, and I think they have good pieces surrounding and the supporting role that they should be able to make a good run. And I think we'll be in the conversation by the end of the season.
Yeah, Texas Tech they're just a lot of horses. They go fast, and so that's I think a big weapon. And I'm going to keep them in the contender range, just because they got the experience, they got the taste from last year. So I just think they're going to be a contender. Final Four, I'm not sure about, but contender.
All right. So with that being said, that is going to wrap up today's episode. Our first episode of ASF Hoops this year, college basketball preseason. You'll be seeing 2 different types of ASF Hoops episodes this year since we were able to kind of evolve our staff a little bit, bringing in Sean, who used to host, I believe it was like the Pensacola ESPN NBA show or something like that. So we're able to have Sean leading the way with Pap and Troy on our quote-unquote NBA team, since me and Ryan do not watch the NBA at all, so I have no idea, and I would look like an idiot talking about it. So we're just going to stay out of their way, and we're going to let them do their thing, and we're going to do our thing on the college basketball side of things. So like we've mentioned multiple times, you're going to be seeing a lot more than just college football and NFL. You're going to see the NBA, you're going to see college basketball, you're going to see the UFC podcast return as well. Ryan, Cliff, you guys got anything else to say here to wrap up this episode?
Continue subscribing to our YouTube channel. Keep watching the YouTube shorts and stuff. We're appreciating how many thousands of views we're getting on those and bringing the draw in. I saw that we've already gone up, I think, 7 subscribers in the past 4 days. So we're loving the support. We're loving everybody tuning in, checking out the links and stuff. And like Andy mentioned at the beginning, check out also Cliff and I on Stars Forever. Not as much so sports related, mostly kind of military and regular news themed, but we do talk sports every so often as well. I was
just going to say we have a recent podcast. We just talked about the impacts of college coach football buyouts, and the problems it's creating. We did a discussion about NIL's impacts on college sports. And so more of the surrounding, not the actual games themselves, but more about the surrounding operations and politics of sports. So there are some nice podcasts you could pick, go down through and pick. It's obvious we name them. So same kind of thing. So if you also like to hear about those things, that is an option. Thank you for letting me join in on the podcast today. So being the winner,
He's going to keep rubbing that in until he loses it again this March. So yeah, with that being said, that is going to wrap up this week's episode. They will be recording the NBA episode tomorrow night. So Ryan will hopefully be getting both of these out before he takes off for a couple weeks. Be the last time you're seeing Ryan for a couple weeks, but he'll be back. Don't worry. But yeah, with that being said, go check out the YouTube, check out the Instagram, check out the merch site, Spotify, whatever it may be. We appreciate you guys for listening as always, and we'll see you guys next week.